Hey everybody, welcome back to Local Music Somewhere. I'm Jess with rBeatz Radio, and today we have two guests that have been in the Charlotte music scene for quite a while. We have Jason Atkins, who is also known as Greazy Keyz, the stadium organist for the Charlotte Checkers. How's it going, Jason?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, Jessica.
Awesome. And we also have Leisure McCorkle, who is a pop rock alt artist, songwriter who has been in the Charlotte area for a good long while. You've had licensing deals with MTV and a couple other things going on. So good to have you here, Leisure.
Thank you for having me, Jessica. Appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah. So what I wanted to do is kind of talk about the fact that it's 2024. We're just starting, a fresh new year. And I kind of wanted to start with you, Jason. Yes. Can you just maybe catch us up on how is this musical life treating you, basically? I want to just hear, how's it going?
Well, overall, it's doing wonderful. I've been very blessed to be a professional musician in Charlotte, North Carolina since basically 1997. So when I moved to town, to really pursue music as a career, which, Charlotte isn't really known as a music city, but I was very fortunate to meet a lot of like-minded musicians and people like the way I play. So it's kept me pretty busy for the past 25 years.
Right. So what about you, Leisure? What's going on with you right now?
I've been working on a lot of new songs for some new records, maybe. I'm working with a couple of different ensembles that I play with. And this year I've decided I'm going to go back and put a band together and play electric. I haven't played electric really a lot since that record came out. I mostly tour acoustic or with other people. I'm excited. It's always hard at the end of a year. You're like, man, I need to take a break. I need to, sometimes you're like, oh, maybe I should just retire or whatever. It's kind of like that. But I guess it's just like these football coaches and basketball coaches. You really, I ran into a couple of friends a couple of weeks ago, and they were just like, well, what do you think? And I was like, I don't think I can do anything else at this point in time. I think I've been doing this for so long. And I do love it.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
You've been doing it so long, and
right.
It's wrapped around your personality and your everything about you. It's like, what else would I do now at this point in time,
Yeah, your identity's kind of caught up in it, and your lifestyle.
Right.
And you kind of build your life around it, and it's you don't simply just walk away from it. It's, you can get frustrated and you can get down, and or maybe, you don't. It doesn't go quite the way you expect it to, but again, you just kind of keep pushing.
You roll with it.
Right.
Roll with it.
And I've been watching Game of Thrones again, and I'm gonna become a faceless man this year.
I'm
gonna be the David Bowie. I'm gonna become something new and something exciting, and that's right.
That's something you've always been good about.
Yeah.
Leisure. I've known Leisure for 30 years, and he is like a chameleon, which is indicative of a true artist. So, absolutely. Go back and listen to his tracks, and he's amazing.
I saw in a blurb something about, you're hosting an open mic night at a Smokey Joe's, and it really kind of hit me because I kind of started off, that was my first place where I had a full band on stage as a teenager.
Smokey Joe's.
It holds a place in my heart.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
So we're talking, circa 2005 with the, the Toscos and all of that. And I still do work with Dave Harris at Studio B, but I wanted to talk about how the Charlotte music scene, it's not exactly, I don't know if you would call it a serious music scene, but it has changed within those last 20 years drastically.
Absolutely.
So let's talk to that.
Yes. So from my experience personally, like I said, the scene has changed. Obviously, original artists kind of come and maybe go and change formats. The scene itself has gone from, having a lot of fantastic standalone venues where you had to go to the venue to see a band, to where a lot of those are gone. And so bands have had to adapt to, like Leisure was saying, maybe you only play acoustic shows, some things maybe a little bit more low key, more, what you call like bar or patio scene, as opposed to a full blown show. But the working musicians have adapted and have arrange their shows and their formats to kind of fit that and continue to play and get their music out there. And of course, with the internet and streaming, that's another avenue that you see a lot of folks put more focus on, as opposed to the live show. And you've seen a big gap where, major artists come through, and so they draw a lot of people to those shows, whereas, local shows may not be as well attended. But, there still are those diehard folks who love live music and will come out. And you're always having opportunities to make new fans and to meet new people. So the bands have definitely changed, and I've been fortunate enough to be a part of that over the past 30 years. But overall, I'm really happy with things seem to be coming back around, with the pandemic and everything, and it kind of really took a big hit in a lot of places and a lot of bands. But since things have reopened a couple of years back, it's really allowed a lot of opportunity for people to kind of reemerge, new artists and even old artists to kind of come back around and kind of find their own ground again.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And Leisure, I heard you talking about the Milestones still being a pretty good staple in town. Do you feel like you have, some favorite spots that have lasted a long time, or maybe anything new that's popped up in Charlotte?
Yeah. I mean, I think Charlotte's going through a renaissance. I'm starting to see a lot more, some original music coming back around, which is, I'm really a proponent of that, but also the musicianship is at such a high level now. I don't know if I can remember it other than like being young and going to Reliable
music store.
Yeah, a great music store, which we don't have anymore. But Greazy Keyz is right. He's talking about, we've had to adjust to all these breweries, mainly. Breweries changed everything.
Yes.
And that made it a little bit more difficult to play live music venues, say like if you're playing Snug or Harbor or Petra's or the Visualite or Neighborhood Theater. It made it a little bit more difficult because those shows cost $10 or $15 to go see, as opposed to a brewery who had the capital to make it so that it was free to go to. I think that changed a lot of things, but I'm starting to see people now come back to the, I want to go to a real venue. I'm all right with paying $10 or $15. I'm all right with buying something from the merch table, because I know that this, especially vinyl is making a big comeback. I went to see Tara Bush, who was an old roommate of mine, who's I Speak Machine.
Fantastic.
From LA. She was at Snug Harbor on a Monday night. The place was packed, and they had vinyl, and people were buying everything on the merch table to support the people that were on tour. And it actually really raised my appreciation for the fact that when Charlotte really wants to kick down and be a music town, it can be.
It can.
And it does. I mean, you go to Greazy Keyz plays Smokey Joe's. Now, like you're talking about the Smokey Joe's.
Yes.
There is music every night in this town. I mean, a lot of the business is not necessarily here, which is what people really, that was what Chapel Hill and Athens and places like that had back in the day. And now people from New York and LA are all moving to Nashville. That's where the center of business, I think, is. I'm getting arguments with my friends all the time. New York and LA will always be the center of business. No, Nashville is the center of the business of music. But if you go in any night of the week, there's probably multiple great musicians and new musicians coming in and sitting in with them all over town at all kinds of cool little venues.
Yes.
And when people say this is not a music town, I have to disagree. It's a big town now. I mean, there's over 1 million people in this town now. So it's not, there's competition. That's the problem, is that
spread out. When
I play with my band, I'm hoping that some sports team is not playing against me, because we until Taylor Swift, we always lost against sports. Now I'm pulling for Taylor Swift simply because they had to move the Argentinian national team to another stadium because she was playing in Argentina. And I was like, yes, the musician finally got the last laugh. And of course I get in arguments with my friends about Taylor Swift, but we'll come back to that later. But the important thing is that vinyl, which was on the rise before her, and all these big bands selling vinyl now, is that vinyl's back on the thing, and that to me is a sort of canary in a coal mine.
Right.
That music is back ready to roll again, and Charlotte has the potential to be anything it wants because the money is here and the people are here. And if we can support 76,000 people at Bank of America Stadium to see the soccer team, we can definitely have original bands blow up and be big here. And I mean, we already have. We've had the Ava Brothers.
Ava Brothers play number one.
I mean, they're winning Grammys. Fetch and Bones was around. I mean, they were breaking all the sort of ideas about what Charlotte could be. We don't live in a world where you have to be so much commercially successful to be an icon of whatever you're doing, right?
Right. And I'll just speak to that in my role as Greazy Keyz. Now, Greazy Keyz is a moniker that I've become known as because I'm the organist for Charlotte Checkers hockey team, also the organist for the Kannapolis Cannonballers, and occasionally the Charlotte Knights baseball team. And having the fan interaction with that definitely solidifies that, people, whether they know it or not, subconsciously, they crave live music, and within the sports world, obviously the organ is nostalgic. It was a very early on a part of the hockey and baseball soundtrack, which of course gave way to DJs and things like that, as often happens with live music. But with me taking that on and having the fans just sort of rally around that and support that, it just sort of reiterates, well, I have a purpose here. People really have a thirst, a hunger for live music, no matter where it's coming from. And so I've been very fortunate to experience that on top of, just out there hustling, playing gigs night after night, whether it be, cover gigs, original gigs, solo with a band or supporting original artists like Leisure. It's there. And like I said, if people give it a chance and people go out there and they look for it, they will definitely find it any night of the week.
And I think that's a great point, is that Charlotte has evolved in a way in which Greazy Keyz is mixing sport with music.
Yeah.
And if you go out on any night of town, you're going to see people playing covers and playing original music. You're going to see like all these things that just didn't really happen in my younger times around town. We've evolved to understand that people want to be entertained. I mean, and I think the thing is that people have really dug in deep to write the best songs they can, to play the best they can. Like I go to Comet on Sunday nights to see Amari and the Hellhounds. That's one of the best bands around in town.
Absolutely.
And I think different places and venues have adapted to their fan base, their sort of niche, right? Tommy's Pub is another place for great bands. And they have Comet and Tommy's Pub are they're actually a free place to go see music, but the more people that come and the more people that eat and drink and whatever, that's how they pay the bands and stuff like that. So they've adopted another model. I think Charlotte musicians would be so much better off if we were getting in front of more people, because in Charlotte, there's probably 75% of the population that doesn't know how to go and see the hottest music that's going on in town. They don't know the venues. They don't know and so it's almost like education. It's almost like marketing and branding. This is just going to take some work. And I think but that's the only really hurdle that I see, is that you get some of these incredible people in front of the audiences and they'll keep coming back and they'll keep supporting and it'll drive the bands to make records and do bigger things, I think.
Mm-hmm. I would agree 100%. To expose, because that's, I never claim to be the best. Like, I don't approach music and like, well, I've got to be the best at this or else, because I would have given up a long time ago, because there, like Leezy said, there's so many fantastic musicians, even in Charlotte, that you can't have that mindset of like, I have to be the best or I'm the absolute best because I do this and that. I'm just grateful for the opportunity. But yeah, having opportunities to get in front of a lot of people, I think would help bands.
By the way, Hager is the best.
Hager, he would say that too. I think he would agree with you. Michael Hager, he's an amazing guitarist. He probably is one of the best guitar players I've ever seen. Ever. But he is definitely the best.
Well, that's good to hear. So I also wanted to bring up, when we are kind of trying to craft a life as a musician, we typically have to wear multiple hats. It's
Absolutely.
just never one road. You're talking about adding on, session work,
yes.
possibly mentoring and
yes.
teaching, things like that. And I know you guys do so many different things. I know Leisure, you've got the PhD in anthropology. I'm sure that connects into music somehow, but, tell me more about like being able to, kind of cast a wide net, if you will, to be able to, have that come back to you in the way that you're aiming for.
Well, my approach has been just the community, and I learned it very early on. Like Leisure mentioned earlier, there was a fantastic music store called Reliable Music that was one of the Southeast's probably quintessential music stores up until about 2000, 2001, that I got hired on when I was a teenager and was the cashier there. So I met everybody. Everybody went through me. And so I've made friendships with musicians that I still work with today, that I just... Without that opportunity, I don't know if I would have ever been able to plug in as well initially coming up in the music scene. So just having that community was awesome. But then from there on, it was like, like Lisa's saying, you have to be diversified. You can't, like, I became the keyboard player for several different bands. And so that was my approach is I'm an artist in many ways, but I don't see myself or I haven't seen myself as being like the focal point. Like I was very satisfied being a sideman, adding keyboards to records. And so that I think helped me in a lot of ways, just being plugged in and being part of the community and not being only serving myself, but, helping others and kind of sweetening and enhancing their sound and being more song focused with that approach and not feeling like, well, I have to have a piano solo in every single song. No, you don't. You play to the song and you make it sound good.
Right.
And so to me, that helped me to sort of have the mindset, okay, well, I'm not going to be single-minded. I'm going to spread myself out as much as I can. And that did evolve into not only sessions with bands, but then also teaching. I was a private teacher for about 13 years. And enjoyed that time helping young kids and adults, kind of follow some of their passions. When COVID hit, that pretty much put a nail in that coffin. But then I've been able to continue to play, and again, like do open mic on Tuesday nights, every Tuesday at Smokey Joe's. The band is called the Smokin' Jays, and it involves some of the best. Some of the best musicians in town as the house band. And again, just so we're meeting new people that come in, young amateurs. And I've seen guys who've developed and grown and become professional musicians themselves. And I've been a part of that for about 12 years. And that's the reason why I'm there on Tuesday nights is for that community. And it affords me other opportunities to, to pick up and play or be involved with in a fantastic wedding band. We play weddings, do things like that, ceremonies, receptions. But I just feel really fortunate. Again, I come back to being, just being the organist for the, that to me was a revelation and something I never would have imagined being that. That's where my head is at, is to kind of grow in the sports organ field. Because to me, it's unlike anything I've experienced.
Right.
The fan interaction is, it's with a band, it's like you make a record or you go play a show and you wait till the end of the song for applause or man, how many songs did we stream or how many, you look for that sort of fan feedback. Whereas, in the sports, it's immediate, right. I'm out on the concourse, I'm out near the rink. So I'm surrounded by people coming up and talking to me, interacting with me. And that to me just really opened my eyes and really fed that part of me that as a musician, you look for, you look for that affirmation, you look for that, and you want to entertain people. And that just, to me, was like, put it to a whole new level that I really, really enjoyed that, I really want to focus on my next, 15, 20 years, of music is be the sports organist for the Carolinas. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, you also hit on a couple things there. It's like the songs. It's about the songs.
Always.
You know what I mean? I mean, I talk to different people that are young and old, and we talk about it. I was like, it's about the songs. And I think if you do this long enough, and I started off as a side guy. I wasn't actually the front man. I wasn't the singer. I thought I was going to be a lead guitar in a punk rock band or whatever that means. And back in the 80s and you know, slowly I was a main songwriter in the band. But you know, the way I look at it is that whether you are one of the greatest players in town, you're doing the sessions, you're doing the live shows or whatever, I was like, if it's not about the song, you're in the wrong business. I mean, I hate to say business, but you know, I mean, I know lots of people that they want to be Instagram influencers and things like that. And, you know, Charlotte's not so much as much as like other cities like LA and things like that. But, you know, if you want to be an influencer, you're in for a rude awakening when it comes down to the nitty gritty when your time is done, you know? And I think that if you're not in it for the songs and in for the music, you won't last. You'll become an actor or you'll become something else, you know, or whatever. And another thing about what Greazy Keyz, I mean, he's been very fortunate that he did sort of find these. I mean, he plays piano, so he does have, I think, probably a jump on a lot of us. And
there aren't very many of us, you know.
Well, that's an instrument though that leads itself to being in demand. Right. Like a drummer, a good drummer is also, I think, a drummer that anticipates how the song should go, even if they don't really know it. I lost one of my longtime drummers a couple years ago, 35 years ago, or I played with him for 35 years, but I lost him a couple years ago. And, I mean, it's so weird playing with other people, even though I've played with other drummers. It's so weird because superstar Gary Guthrie knew what I was going to do. I had my back to him for the entire time we were playing, you know, but he anticipated everything that I was going to do because we had played together that long. And he was about the songs. I mean, he didn't want to play drum solos. He didn't want to play, you know, like Greazy Keyz was saying, it wasn't about being a show off.
Right.
If the song is not getting its best. And that's what I love about in town now. I play with a lot of different people. And I say to them, I say, I just want the song to be the best it is. I don't care if I'm singing or playing on everything or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. As long as the song is great. And I grew up with the Beatles and Billy Joel, you know, as my staples. And so I put the bar is there for me, even though I might not be able to live up to that. That is where the bar is, right? And that Get Back documentary that Peter Jackson did.
Oh man, eye-opening.
Love it.
It made me just turn. I mean, the first episode was brutal, but then you see the Beatles make the magic in the second, third, especially when Billy Preston comes in.
Oh yeah,
right.
It was amazing.
Keyboard player.
I know.
Right?
It gave me chills whenever they were playing the song Get Back, and it's like, oh my gosh, that is the take that you've heard 1,000 times. Right. And it's just sitting in a room.
What I love about that scene is, you know, his process. It's almost like sifting for gold, right? You've got this
good analogy.
Yeah. You've got this kind of compass that is, you know, if it's all about the songs and if we're leading with that in mind and trying to let everything else fall off the sides, I feel like, you know, that's how you're going to get your purest, you know, product, if you will, right? And I think that's a sound logic to stand by as an artist. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind every step of the way. That's why we're, you know, doing this.
I mean, when Paul says, you know, John, this is your band, you know, I'll do what you want. But obviously Paul was on hitting all the levels, the high levels at that point in time when they made that record. And he goes, you know, John just sits over to him and says, just use cauliflower for now. That's what I do until you figure out. And we know the words that are going to be on the final product because this is an old film, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
And he's going around it to get there. Like he doesn't know that's going to be the line yet. And you see Paul McCartney doing, he makes the magic in front of your eyes. That's what I want to do. Like, you know what I mean? That's the kind of magic. That's one of the things I do miss about being in a band though. Back in the day, we used to have Greazy Keyz will remember, we used to have these practice places over off of Mint Street.
Oh yes.
And you know, I used to look forward though to You go like maybe 2 or 3 times a week to practice, and you get a 6-pack of beer if you're old enough.
Yep.
And you would then go and do, practice for 3 hours. And those were some of the best parts, I think, about even better sometimes than playing the shows. Because sometimes you had practices that were way better than the shows.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You know?
Yep. And it's like, what happened?
I just miss those days. I mean, now everybody's playing so much, they don't have time to rehearse, to practice. And so it's more of I got my stuff together, I'll be there and I'll make it happen.
Right.
And I think that I do miss those days, though, because I think a lot of that was very collaborative.
Yeah, the community part for me, too, that same place was great because there was always bands side by side, rehearsing, jamming, coming out, taking a smoke break, take a beer break, and BS, between songs. It was a great time.
I read somewhere in one of your interviews, Jason, about there was a quote that you value the continuation of learning. Okay. And local music somewhere is pretty much, it's an educational resource where we're talking to everybody of all different roles and things like that. And I really connect with that statement of continuing to learn, because the scape of the scene is changing all the time. And I think we have to be able to evolve and adapt to all that. So I'd like for you to speak a little bit more to that sentiment of continual learning.
Well, yeah, I feel like it's important, we all, not to rest on your laurels, to keep striving. Right. To me, as an artist, whether as a songwriter or performer, to continue to grow, and not only your musicianship, but, technology and things like that, just having, your finger on the pulse of that, I think is so important for really in any career, but particularly in music, because again, it's very fast changing and you want to kind of stay on top of things. So, and I feel fortunate to be in a place where, maybe, I'm not driven to be a teacher anymore, but I'm seeing the positive influence of young kids seeing me at the Checkers game. And I've had, probably at least a dozen young kids come up to me and be like, I want to be like you. Or like literally make signs and say, I want to be Greazy Keyz. And I just love that. And just to think that even though I might not be, I'm not your teacher or your direct mentor, but just to have that influence in this, and to show, hey, music can be done. It doesn't have to be through your laptop. It doesn't have to be a computer. You can play the music. And I've encouraged kids, hey, you learn a song, you come up here before the game, I'll let you sit down and play it. I've even encouraged kids that way.
Wow.
Just to afford them that opportunity and to let them know, hey, it is possible. And to me, that's been even a bigger joy than just teaching directly, because it can go either way. Not everyone is gifted in or passionate about the music, but I always try to encourage. And even when I taught lessons, if the kid didn't practice that week, I never brought down the hammer. To me, that was never the point. It was always the love of the music, and whether they have that individual drive or not, that's kind of on them. I just try to keep it in a positive light at all times. Whether I'm teaching or performing, you're always going to see me with a smile. I'm never going to say no to someone who wants to come up and talk music or just see the organ or just watch me play. I encourage that, and I'm very fortunate that people have caught on to that. Where, when you come to a Checkers game, I have the grease pit. Okay, that's the new thing. The grease pit is section 127 in Bojangles Coliseum, and they don't. When you try to buy tickets for a Checkers game, you can't buy tickets in section 127 currently.
I tried. I tried to get season tickets in the section. They were like, "Well, we can't. We can put you in there, but you can't really." So
what I've done is I've kind of just made that sort of like an open seating. I invite fans over, and they'll come over, and hang out maybe one period, and then switch back to the normal seats for the second period. Because we attack different sides, but. That to me, again, it's a great opportunity to influence and to educate and to let folks know, what the heck is the organ? What is this? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not the DJ. I'm oftentimes confused for the DJ. It's like, no, I'm not the DJ. I'm the organ player. I'm playing the live music. So yeah, to me, education and just keeping it in a positive light, is one of my major it's a great reciprocating sort of energy that comes from it. particularly, with sporting events and young kids and people who may have a bit of knowledge about the organ or grew up listening to the organ at, wherever they were from, like Buffalo or somewhere up north where hockey and organ is like synonymous. And it's great to have them come here and experience what I can bring to it. And people just accept it and love it. And I keep trying to grow and make it, modern in a lot of ways, but yet still retain that classic organ sound. Like when you come to Checkers, you're hearing a 75-year-old organ, although I might incorporate other beats and tracks and things like that to sort of boost the energy of it. You're still going to hear the organ no matter what. So
that's
great. Love to have people learn about that.
Right. Love to hear it. Yeah, no, it couples greatly the continual learning and then keeping the songs as the compass, as the artistry.
Yes.
I love it.
Thank you.
Leisure, do you have any closing remarks today for our listeners?
Just the same thing. I'm an anthropologist, and I think it's helped my songwriting and helped both ways, mirrors both ways. And I agree with him. I've been a professor and a director of a research center, and I spend a lot of time, teaching, and you are always a student. I don't think anybody that really seriously reflects on that particular, sort of profession would tell you any different, that if you're not learning, then it's probably time to let it go and retire. It's like you can be one of the best at your field or your discipline or your instrument or whatever, but if you're not continuously learning, then it really gets old fast. So, but many of my students, I've had some great students, and one of the very first ones I had was at Queens College, but now it's Queens University. But over here in Charlotte, that was one of my first real jobs. And I had a student, and man, he challenged me. He wrote some of the best. He's a philosopher. He wrote some of the best papers. We would go to the pub and talk for hours about his papers, and I was just like, man, this is unbelievable stuff. And it was it's an amazing thing. And Greazy Keyz is right. He's influencing people that might turn around and become a musician or something else to do with music, out of that experience, they might become the person that makes music, the music town over Nashville one day.
You never know.
You never know.
I'm all about it. If I have an inkling to think that I've made that kind of impact on someone's life, that makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much. Totally. Well, guys, thank you so much for being on this show today. I really enjoyed having a good chat with you guys.
Great show. Thank you so much for having us.
All right. Yeah, ring that gong. All right. Yeah,
Thank you,
Jason
Jessica.
Atkins, Greazy Keyz, and Leisure McCorkle. Thank you guys so much for another episode of Local Music Somewhere. I'm Jess, and we'll catch y'all all next time.
Cheers.
Thank you, Jess.